I will say, in the wake of every tragedy, there are things that are predictable. One of the things that's predictable is that you see some people engaging in, I think, partisan games and trying to blame.
See, there you go. Don't politicize it. I told you, right on script. Now is not the time, and this is a natural disaster. It is what it is. It happens. Let's get started on the warning systems and the potential failures.
And this is a part of the country that people here know as a flash flood alley. There's a combination of extreme rain events, very thin soil.
Torrential rain caused one river to surge nearly 26 feet in just 45 minutes early Friday morning.
We're at Camp Mystic looking for our kids.
Children's summer camps dot the shoreline of the Guadalupe. At Camp Mystic, an all-girls summer camp, the river started running through cabins where children were sleeping. Nearly a dozen third and fourth grade girls are still missing.
We're looking for places that they're going to potentially be alive.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott said no one anticipated the severity of the storm.
The moment in time when they knew the magnitude of the water, it's a difficult decision whether or not to begin.
It's pretty crazy when you think about it, but like Republicans do actively work against the best interests of the public in every aspect of governance. Someone in the chat was talking about like harm reduction initiatives for safe injection sites. Like they're pro-capital, pro-profit, and anti-human for every single issue. But because this kind of death is often, as we've talked about before with Luigi Mangione, social murder, most people are oblivious because it's not immediate. It's just like, you don't see it as like action reaction. You see it as like something that is totally out of people's hands.
Despite deadly floods here in the past, there are no outdoor warning systems here, no sirens. Instead, people rely on predictions and forecasts from the National Weather Service. Now, local officials debated adding a system back in 2017. They held off because of the cost of that system.
We're also learning more about the people who died in this tragedy, including 8- and 9-year-old girls at Camp Mystic, just feet from the Guadalupe River. The pictures we're showing you here show the inside of cabins at the camp. After the floodwaters rushed through, you can see everything is covered in mud. It is not clear whether the girls in these cabins were able to escape. Janet Shamlian is downriver from here. She has been gathering stories about what happened. Janet, good morning to you.
Maurice, good morning. You can only imagine the anguish and the heartbreak as some families are still waiting on word of their loved ones. And the moms and dads who dropped off their little girls at Camp Mystic, some just a few days earlier, thinking these girls were about to have the summer of their life. Even though it has been 3 days, for those who haven't heard, you know, they are holding on.
Yeah, GOP cycle, cut funding, ruin lives, pray hard. Devastation takes place, rinse and repeat.
Out hope this morning.
This is the aftermath of unimaginable tragedy. Devastated bunkhouses at Camp Mystic, where some of the girls who went missing were staying as floodwaters engulfed the grounds. Georgia Congressman Buddy Carter said his 2 grandchildren survived, but their cousin, 9-year-old Janie Hunt, died. She's related to Kansas City Chiefs owner Clark Hunt.
God has wrapped his arms around her, in our thoughts and prayers with all of those involved.
It just started pouring in. We had to fight the door to get it closed.
Christina Wilson said her fiance.
Which one's cheaper, setting up flood detection systems or picking up kids' corpses? Kids' corpses for sure. Actually, it's probably not. It's probably not cheaper, but it's kind of like this. The calculation in the absence of government intervention, the calculation that like companies make in terms of safety and creating fail-safes and redundancies goes away because it's easier to make a cheaper alternative and cut corners in the production of airplanes, for example, and increasingly cut costs that way so you can keep driving up the profit margins, and then make this calculation that if people die in the process due to your elimination of safety measures, for example, ultimately, it's still more cost effective to let people die. And the same thing goes, and the same thing happens here as well. We need more tax breaks. We need to fund Israel. We need to fund military incursions overseas. We can't fund the safety measures because they're too costly. And we'll basically, you know, they're banking on people's inability to pay attention to a singular issue and who is perhaps most responsible for said singular issue. What ideological force is responsible for these issues? They're banking on people's inability to to understand who the villains are here. So then they just move on to the next thing.
27-year-old Julian Ryan severed an artery in his arm as he punched open a window when floodwaters inundated their home in the community of Ingram. His family was able to escape. He was not.
He had lost all of it, all his blood. He looked at me and the kids and my mother-in-law, and he was like, sorry, I'm not going to make it. I love y'all.
In Kerrville, Emily Gutierrez told us her cousin Leo's house was swept from its foundation. She said Leo, his wife, and their 2-year-old son are still missing.
As much as we want to pray and hope, there's only so much a human can actually hold on. All the muck, all the dirty water, all the trash, the trees. If the cars are flipped over and the houses are moved, what chance does human have?
Those who knew Camp Mystic's owner, Dick Eastland, say he died heroically, trying to rescue campers. His grandson writing, if he wasn't going to die of natural causes, this was the only other way, saving the girls that he so loved and cared for.
He was, a man that made everyone feel safe and seen. He was just an extremely selfless person, and he showed that until the very end.
Once was lost, but now I'm found. On Friday, hundreds of girls able to evacuate from Camp Mystic sang songs through their tears as they rode a bus through the devastation. The NFL and singer Shakira are among those already donating to the flood relief effort.
Reddit atheist ass chat. I mean, honestly, these are victims of natural disasters, but I do sometimes feel like we have a severe case of medieval peasant brain. Like, how is this any different? We live in 2025 and we're treating these natural disasters when we know what the causes of it are, when we have significantly better technological surveillance mechanisms and prevention and warning systems that we could implement. We have satellites that are mapping out every goddamn cloud, and we just turn around and we're like, oh, God willed it. We're not cavemen anymore, you know what I mean? We're not looking up at the ball in the sky and going oh, this is the sky gods taking out revenge. It's not that the people themselves, I don't fault the people themselves for praying to God. That's understandable in times of crisis like this. That's the purpose that religion serves. But you also have to still remember, beyond the grieving mothers that are saying this kind of stuff, who is understandable for them to grieve in this way, it's always important to analyze the incident and what contributed to it with cold, rational, logical thinking. Yeah, here, people don't understand how fast this developed. A time-lapse video provided by an eyewitness showed floodwaters rising over a causeway in Kingsland, Texas, completely submerging it in the span of a few minutes. This is a 50-minute increase, but look how fast it goes from 1711, the road exists. Look at this. 1711, road exists. Boom. 1717, it's gone. It went from 511 to 5 by 5, from 511 to 516, the road is completely submerged. That's crazy. It's basically like a dam collapsing. That's what it feels like. Yeah. The issue is there's massive drought. So then the environment is the environment is already susceptible to flash floods for that reason. And then there's massive rainfall that follows after the massive drought, and the ground can't soak up the water fast enough, and you create this incredible condition where these areas that are known floodplains have a significantly higher amount of water that blow through. You have to remember, there are always people that turn around and say oh, these are red states, they deserve it, or whatever obviously they don't. Okay, nobody deserves this. I don't give a what they voted for. I don't even care if they deny climate change. In many of these circumstances, you have 40% of the state, some of the most underserved, marginalized communities that live in these areas that are literally voting for the Democrats. It's just that they're so disenfranchised through voter suppression and numerous other methods that, it doesn't matter. Like, their existence doesn't matter. Just like there's 4 million registered Republican voters in the state of California. A lot of people forget that, like, California as a state has more Republicans than Republican states, like 3 Republican states combined. And in the red states, there's a ton of Democrat voters as well. Not that party allegiances matter at all. It doesn't, especially in times of like natural disasters. First and foremost, there should be an opportunity to lend support, and then educate people. Like, that should be the goal here. Like, this is yet another crisis that was avoidable. These things, like, we have the capacity to create successful prevention methods. We have the capacity to harden our infrastructure. We don't do any of those things. So get mad at the real people that are get mad at the people who are actually responsible for these deadly events, rather than victims of said deadly events.
Texas is grieving right now.
Oh wow, Ted Cruz is there instead of flying at the Cancun again. Shocked, I tell you. I guess it's because his house is not at risk of flash flooding, so he didn't have to escape. Yeah, maybe he had a layover. Yeah, maybe the flash floods actually didn't let him fly out with his private jet or something.
The pain, the shock of what has transpired these last few days has broken the heart of our state. As of yesterday, the confirmed death.
This sociopath is trying to come across as though he's like empathetic here, which is crazy.
Toll was 82, and those numbers are continuing to go up. The children, the little girls who were lost at Camp Mystic. That's every parent's nightmare.
Yeah, also, this is a point as well, obviously. A common progressive fantasy is that once conservatives see the consequences of climate change, they will have some sort of come-to-Jesus moment, but it's always pretty obvious to people paying attention that they are just going to blame it on deep state flooding tech and learn nothing. But I think this is a defeatist attitude to have, because for every 5 people that will do this exact same thing, there will be 3 people that can be convinced. So you have to work every single day to convince those 3 people, to find those 3 people and convince them.
But I want to say, in the face of all of this, it is simultaneously inspiring. Every time there's a tragedy, every time there's a natural disaster in Texas, Texans come together. Texas is a big state. We got 31 million people, and we have hurricanes, we have tornadoes, we have wildfires. Tragedies hit this state, natural disasters hit this state, and without fail, 100 out of 100 times when that happens, we see Texans coming together, helping each other, engaging in acts of heroism. There have been over 850 high water rescues since this flooding began. 850.
Cruz is a bad actor, I know. I mean, he's both a nefarious player here and also responsible, especially when you can like directly point to some of the initiatives of this government. This is part of the reason why I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot, but this is part of the reason why I get mad at the Democrats, because Democrats should be, one, immediately helping in the recovery and relief efforts, which they are, but also simultaneously speaking from every podium, every avenue available about how cutting the National Weather Service and cutting NOAA and the defunding and the austerity that this government is engaging in is so devastating, is so deadly.
All right, we're getting some breaking news that we've been following over the last hour with a Trump administration official confirming that about 5% of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration are being let go. That agency includes the National Weather Service. They work together to put together sometimes life-saving forecasts for severe weather threats.
People are still going to obviously talk about how this couldn't be prevented. It's a natural disaster. There are systemic reasons as to why these natural disasters that are supposed to be once in a lifetime are happening with higher frequency, right? There's obviously that, and that should be talked about, climate change specifically in this context. But then there's also the prevention and the infrastructure hardening that needs to happen. It's not even once every 5 years. It's happening yearly. And at that point, it's just a normal part of existence. And we have to, at the very least, create some sort of protection to make sure that we protect people and to avoid unnecessary deaths. And then at the last stage, we talk about the recovery and relief. There's also that aspect of it, because on the recovery and relief side, the Trump administration is cutting FEMA, reallocating FEMA resources to immigrant detention centers, to build immigrant detention centers like the Alligator Auschwitz that they build in Florida. They're utilizing the National Guard they're federalizing the National Guard, or utilizing the National Guard to work in these these kidnapping operations of your neighbors, utilizing the Marine Corps in this way. Our priorities are completely out of whack, and I think it's good to talk to people about that. It's good to talk to people about this and show them what the administration is tasked with doing. In the same ways that the Republicans will actively point the finger of blame at the Democrats and be like, oh, all they care about is like trans people. All they care about is trans people. Ironically enough, the Democrats don't care about trans people, but that's besides the point. Use Republican tactics in the same exact ways against them. They're nowhere to be found. And the moments where they are, they come in after the fact, after the devastation is done, and they turn around and say, oh, thoughts and prayers, when in fact, their actions also led to the devastation and the impact being much larger than it should be.
And I will tell you, the president said, Ted, anything Texas needs, the answer is yes. Whatever assets you need, whatever resources you need, yes, let us know, and we will provide everything. Within hours, we had helicopters, over a dozen helicopters in the air. National Guard, DPS, game wardens, Coast Guard, doing search and rescue, reaching down. We've all seen the videos of little girls being pulled up, hoisted out of harm's way. Incredible courage and heroism. Search and rescue is the first stage. But the process of coming together and rebuilding is going to take longer. And I will say to all the grieving families, to all of those who've gotten the worst news imaginable, that your little girl, she's gone.
Turns out Cancun Cruz was in Europe over the weekend. Ted Cruz caught vacationing as tragedy strikes again. The Daily Beast reports that Ted Cruz was vacationing in Europe as floods ripped through central Texas, killing at least 89 people, including 27 campers and counselors from a summer camp. The Texas senator was spotted visiting the Parthenon in the Greek capital Athens with his wife Heidi on Saturday evening. Brother, are you joking? Busted again. Cancun Cruz, this time in Greece. Oh my Lord.
I will say, for many of us, those are friends and neighbors who've lost children. Got multiple kids who go to school with my girls. The mayor asked for prayers.
Dude, this motherfucker is also like trying to be like, we're all victims here. It's like, bro, you were in Greece. Like, oh, we're all victims here. Let me tell you, okay, me, Ted Cruz, I'm a victim of this flooding. You don't understand. Half of the people who live in that area, Ted Cruz literally voted to cut their Medicaid. You understand me? Like, that's coming down the line. Half of the people, he voted to cut their Medicaid, and also has actively petitioned alongside the Trump administration to cut FEMA funding or to reallocate FEMA resources to the immigration detention scheme that this administration is doing, the immigration enforcement scheme that this administration is doing. And after doing all that, which is a lot of work, it's just a lot of hard work, he had to f off and go to Greece.
And I want to say thank you to the millions of Texans, to the millions of Americans, to the millions of people all over the world right now who are praying for Texas and praying for those parents. Going through this grief, it is going to take friends and family embracing and hugging and holding them while they weep. And it's going to take the church. With every disaster, one of the things we see here in Texas is the church steps up and the church helps and the church feeds and clothes and comforts.
Yeah, church should replace the welfare state. Here's another great take from this. Obviously, the initial reports are coming out already. Officials feared the flood risk of Texan youth camps were imminent, but rejected a warning system, deeming it too expensive. Officials feared flood risk to youth camps, but rejected a warning system. And Adam Johnson says, one thing the left, such as it is, needs to emphasize over and over is that local/state budget constraints are entirely artificial. They're manufactured austerity. If the federal government can invent $38 billion out of thin air to fund a genocide, it can afford to build flood warning systems. These budget shortfalls are not real. The federal government can invent money and transfer it to states for essential projects whenever it wishes. We simply choose not to because subjecting 50 states and thousands of municipalities to a game of neoliberal bum fights empowers capital. This person doesn't understand the point. He says local state budget constraints are real. They are, except the federal government can always offer additional funds and additional resources in times of necessity. It is always a matter of interest. The biggest hurdle here is never, oh, where will we find the money? Because there's always money for war. The biggest hurdle is how do we actually reallocate these resources to these sorts of incredibly important and sometimes costly prevention methods. The conversation around deficits only become a serious point of contention when the expenditures we're talking about help the working poor. They only talk about how will we fund this whenever it's something that helps you out. Every single year, every single congressional session, we increase the military budget by hundreds of billions of dollars. Even in this last Trump tax cut bill, the big beautiful bill, the big bomb for the working poor, there was $150 additional billion for the military. There was $175 billion for Trump's immigration enforcement scheme. Here's the New York Times on this as well. As floods hit, key roles were vacant at Weather Service offices in Texas. Some experts say staff shortages might have complicated forecasters' ability to coordinate responses with local emergency management officials. Do not let these fucking assholes get away with it. They'll say thoughts and prayers. They'll say now is not the time. That's the thing that I told you. Initially, when people ask these questions like, how could this have happened? The first response from Republicans will be, oh, now is not the time. Now is not the time. No, it is the time. When is the appropriate time? They do this with mass shootings too, which aren't even natural disasters to begin with.
And now we'll take questions.
Senator, you talked about how you know kids here, how you've taken your own kids to camp. Was it ever communicated to you that there was a need, that it was a priority to have a warning system so people had a chance to escape something like this?
Well, listen, I think anytime you're dealing with major rivers, there's a risk of flooding, and there's always been a risk of flooding, particularly on the Guadalupe River. I will say, in the wake of every tragedy, there are things that are predictable. One of the things that's predictable is that you see some people engaging in, I think, partisan games and trying to blame.
See, there you go. There's always a chance of disaster. God willed it. God willed it. God is great. God is good. We don't know the ways in which God works, but don't politicize it. I told you, right on script. Right on script. Now is not the time. And this is a natural disaster. It is what it is. It happens. The entire purpose of mankind that has been able to go to the fucking moon, that has been able to build ginormous dams, that has been able to build massive skyscrapers is to overcome nature. And yes, part of that hubris is what's causing these kinds of extreme weather events to take place because of anthropogenic climate change. But there is still so much more that we can do, okay? There's still so much more that we could do in terms of proper prevention, not building campsites and not building campsites around, for example, a riverbed. Or if we do, ensuring that we have the proper resources allocated to warning systems. That's why I gave like the Pompeii example where it's like we just keep rebuilding in the ash cheeks of a volcano over and over again, and then the volcano explodes and the lava takes over the city, and then we rebuild the city once again, and we say, it won't happen again. And we don't even monitor the tectonic activities. We don't even, we underfund the warning systems ahead of time so that there's no evacuation. We just refuse to learn any lessons from any of this, and it's so devastating.
And so I think we will have a reasonable conversation about, are there any ways to have earlier detection? And some of that, the limits of a flash flood, they're very difficult because they can arise so quickly. And so my hope is, in time, we will learn some lessons to implement to next time, and there will be another flood, there will be another disaster.
He's wrong. I mean, this is a lie. Also, this is literally a fucking lie. When he says we will learn from these lessons, his previous response and his current response, as a matter of fact, shows that he's not interested in learning any of the lessons. He literally said, "Oh, there's nothing we can do about it. You know, these things happen," and then turning around and being like, "Oh, well, you know, we'll figure it out after the fact. We'll figure out what went wrong here after the fact." It's like, no, you're just pushing it down when it's no longer important in the public's eye, when it's no longer newsworthy. This is a defensive posture that is the opposite of problem solving. An issue happens, people seek out answers. They don't want to give answers in this time of crisis on purpose, because if they were to properly analyze the situation as we have done so far, even with like the limited amount of information we have thus far, we very quickly arrive at the real villains in the story, which happens to be the fucking Republican Party. The people that are actively underfunding these systems of prevention, alerts, and analysis. He said the same thing in 2018. Senator Cruz, we will rebuild together because that's who Texans are. Surveys, flood damage in Burnett and Llano County urges Texans to heed warnings from local officials. They have just the same script that they hit over and over again, every single fucking time. Same footnotes, same bullet points. You know, thoughts and prayers. God is good. God is great. How could this have happened? We will figure out how this could have happened, and we'll make sure that it doesn't happen again, as they literally work to make it happen again and again and again and again, and make things worse in the process.
You know, I can tell you, I talked about the partisan finger pointing. I think there have been some eager to point at the National Weather Service and say cuts there led to a lack of warning.
No, those cuts were good. Those cuts were good. We saved so much money. We saved so much money. Excuse me, sir. Talking about these cuts, you're kind of making it seem like I need to take accountability for things that I've advocated for, and I don't like it. How dare you, sir? This is not time for partisan finger pointing, sir. These cuts were good. These cuts were great. We need more of them. Also, how could this have happened? I don't like the facts that you are presenting to me. Yeah. Texas Observer, Trump's Doge cuts are a Texas-sized disaster. This came out on July 3rd, 2025. Reckless agency layoffs and the dismantling of federal relief programs could leave the Lone Star State in peril. This was before the fucking flash floods. A day before the flash floods happened, they were like, this is a ginormous issue. A lot of these things that the government is tasked with doing basically have to work invisibly. Like, they have to work, and they're working. They're working in a way where you don't even realize that they're working at all times. You only realize the government is failing when it actually isn't working. You only realize that the government is there when it actually fails in a moment like this. So this is a really important time for leftists and Democrats alike to explain that these are resources that we cannot take funds away from. These are government instruments that we have to rely on, that we have to continue funding, and the Republicans' austerity measures against the war that they're waging against these government systems is actually deadly and will continue to have devastating consequences, such as this one that we just watched.
Facts, and if you look at the facts in particular, number one, that these warnings went out hours before the flood became a true emergency level, but number two, the National Weather Service here, New Braunfels is where they were headquartered. They had additional manpower. In fact, they had 3 additional people working that night, anticipating that it was going to be a very dangerous weather situation. I also think it's worth noting that the National Weather Service Union, which has been very critical of the Doge cuts, has publicly said that they don't believe that the reduction in staffing had any impact whatsoever on their ability to warn of this event. And so, look, I think it is reasonable over time to engage in a retrospective and say at every level what could have been done better, because all of us.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good, actually, that we actually had key roles that were vacant. Like, there were people that took the retirement plan the accelerated retirement plan. And the government did that specifically so that there were less people in these positions. They didn't like directly lay them off. In some instances they did, but in many instances they just basically said, hey man, we're giving you an opportunity before we lay you off. We're just giving you severance pay off with no interest in rehiring. Here's the New York Times reporting on it. Crucial positions at the local office of the National Weather Service were unfilled as severe rainfall inundated parts of Central Texas on Friday morning, prompting some experts to question whether staffing shortages made it harder for the forecasting agency to coordinate with local emergency managers as floodwaters rose. Texas officials appeared to blame the Weather Service for issuing forecasts on Wednesday that underestimated how much rain was coming. But former Weather Service officials said the forecasts were as good as could be expected, given the enormous levels of rainfall and the storm's unusually abrupt escalation. The staffing shortages suggest a separate problem, those former officials said. The loss of experienced people who would typically have helped communicate with local authorities in the hours after flash flood warnings were issued overnight. In an interview, Rob Kelly, the Kerr County judge, and its most senior elected official said the county did not have a warning system because such systems are expensive and local residents are resistant to new spending. Taxpayers won't pay for it, Mr. Kelly said. Asked if people might reconsider it in the light of the catastrophe, he said, I don't know. This is part of the reason why I sometimes say, like, it's better to just do it and not tell people that you're doing it. It's just like, why? Why do you need public feedback on all of this stuff? It's not like they ask every working poor individual whether or not they want to get their SNAP benefits reduced. They just do it anyway. I don't understand it. The National Weather Service San Angelo office, which is responsible for some of the areas hit hardest by Friday's flooding, was missing a senior hydrologist, staff forecaster, and meteorologist in charge. San Antonio office also has significant vacancies. Staff members in those positions are meant to work with local emergency managers to plan for floods, including when and how to warn local residents and help them evacuate. The office's warning coordination meteorologist left on April 30th after taking the early retirement package the Trump administration used to reduce the number of federal employees, according to a person with knowledge of his departure. Some of the openings may predate the current Trump administration, but at both offices, the vacancy rate is roughly double what it was when Mr. Trump returned to the White House in January, according to Mr. Fahey. John Sokich, who until January was the director of congressional affairs for the National Weather Service, said those unfilled positions made it harder to coordinate with local officials because each Weather Service office works as a team. Reduced staffing puts that in jeopardy. A spokeswoman for the National Weather Service, Erica Groh, did not answer questions to the New York Times about the Texas vacancies, including how long those positions have been open and whether those vacancies had contributed to the damage caused by the flooding. There's also another problem here where the NWS staffers that are still employed might be fearful of speaking out against the administration out of an abundance of caution, out of the fear that the administration might actually enact revenge upon them by firing them, which is insane to even think, but it is quite literally a reality. It is within the realm of possible options here. Part of what the Republicans do expertly is consistently claim that these services are not working, so we have to just continue defunding them. That is a part of their advocacy. A part of their advocacy quite literally is to say, these systems are failing. They failed our people. They failed our citizens, which is why we must defund them. They're just taking your tax dollars.